guest, Jenny Dilts, is the founder of Grieving Coach and the host of the podcast Share Your Story, Exploring Humanity One Heart at a Time. You're connected with the Heart of Hospice. I'm Jerry Finter, here with Helen Bauer.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
This episode is sponsored by BeyondWordsCo.com. Beyond Words ensures no one feels alone through life's hardest times. Their care packages support those going through grief, loss, or difficult life transitions. You can also send a care package for birthdays, retirements, promotions, well wishes to encourage, say thank you, or just show appreciation. Order your custom care package at BeyondWordsCo.com. I really like Jenny.
She's got a joyful way about her.
She does. And if I needed a grief coach, and I might, I would definitely call her.
I give you a lot of grief.
Well, this is true.
So maybe Jenny can help you with that. I don't know if that's anticipatory grief. That's workplace grief.
Right. There you go.
So Jenny Dilts is a certified grief and end-of-life coach. She's the host of the podcast Share Your Story, Exploring Humanity One Heart at a Time. Her professional journey as a grief coach started when she sat with a friend days after her husband's sudden death. She's been holding that space with her friend. For Jenny, unlocked and ignited a passion for supporting others in their grief. And she leans into that and she just loves it.
She does. Well, in our interview, she's going to tell you some things about herself that kind of like hospice professionals, we have this kind of odd thing that most normal people don't have, I think.
Yeah, I love the work that I do. What do you do? I work with people who are dying.
Right. And most people run from that. They find it uncomfortable. And yet here we are as hospice professionals, and we lean into that and we enjoy what we do. We enjoy our work. And Jenny's the same way when it comes to being a grief coach. She enjoys the work that she does.
So without further ado, here's our conversation with grief coach Jenny Dilts.
Jenny, it is such an honor to have you with us today. Welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I wish our listeners could see her smile. She's so excited, and it just makes us smile back. I love that mirror effect. That's awesome.
It is. It's great. So, Jenny, tell us, you've been a grief coach for a while. I have to say, I'm a little curious. What's one of the funniest things that's happened to you as a grief coach?
It's a not necessarily a funny thing, but a funny recurring thing. Often when I introduce myself, if the audience is okay with it, I introduce myself saying, "Hi, I'm Jenny, and I love grief." So watching people's reactions after I say that is fantastic.
I bet you get a lot of odd, awkward looks.
I'm sure that's true. So I think something similar to that happens to those of us who work in hospice. When we say we work in hospice, and everybody's like, "Oh, that must be so hard."
Right.
And then I say, "No, I love my job. I love what I
awesome.
get to do."
Right. So you're either creepy, right, or you're an angel. And I can tell you, most hospice and grief professionals, we are neither one of those things. We're somewhere in the middle.
That's right.
We're aliens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We were cut from a different cloth, right?
That's true. We have special gifts is the way I like to think about it. And maybe other people view them as a little bit unusual. So if you love grief, it's your gift.
Yep.
It's your gift. And it's an awesome thing that you have found a place to use your gift.
Yeah, most definitely. So a grief coach, I really like the sound of that. And I like to hear that you're doing this kind of thing. And I like that you enjoy it, that you love grief. That's really awesome. So tell us, as a grief coach, what sources of grief do you see in this work that you do? Because I think most people, when they think of grief, they always think of grief that's related to a death. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that that's not all of it. So what sources of grief do you often see?
So I actually just had a coaching session this morning about grief from the loss of a friendship or the change in a relationship. And it started as grief over giving back a bag of Girl Scout patches.
Really?
Yeah. My client, looking at this Girl Scout stuff, was trying to process, this is not a part of my life anymore. And that was the surface topic. But the meat of the topic was actually my relationship, my friendship with this person is not the same anymore.
I can see that. And that really applies to a lot of different relationships, right? Friendships come and go. You do have deaths, but people get disconnected from other people.
Yeah.
Well, a friendship that's really a deep friendship is one where you've shared a lot of your personal thoughts, feelings, and then to lose that, it's like you're losing a part of yourself in a way. And that person's not dead. They're still alive, which almost makes it harder, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of your identity. It's a little bit of who you are.
Right, right. So grief can come from a lot of different sources. So that's one. What other sources of grief do you see in your practice?
Unmet expectations, unfulfilled dreams, feeling the need to conform to somebody else's expectations, trauma, changes in, like we were talking about earlier, loss of identity or changes in identity.
Right. We see that a lot in hospice.
Oh, I was just thinking the same thing.
Where
We do.
You have this person who has been active, virile all their lives, and all of a sudden, because of this disease or illness that they have, a chronic illness perhaps, they are no longer able to do those things anymore. And so it's a loss of independence sometimes, or a loss of their identity. They're not able to fulfill that role that they used to have. And it really does make a difference. So grief, I think, by definition, really comes down to this sense of loss, right? Losing things, whatever it might be.
Yeah. My definition of grief is the loss or change of connection. Loss, change, or absence of connection.
That's good.
Whether that's a connection to a person, even a favorite spoon, if you're a little one, a blanket, part of yourself.
Yeah. A job, a life role, identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that definitely applies to our hospice patients.
Right. So would you say that a majority of your clients are dealing with grief related to a death or related to other causes?
It usually starts with the death because that's what people think of when they think of grief. Grief is from a loss to death. But then as we work together, then they start to realize, oh, this death wasn't only that physical person. It was the loss of the relationship, the changed role that I have now. It was the loss of my go-to person. It was the loss of my best friend. It was the loss of my parents. It was all of these other losses.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So it kind of begins with that death, and then from there it grows into understanding that there's other losses that came with that death.
Well, and isn't that what anticipatory grief is all about too? With patients and families as they are becoming more and more aware of an impending death.
Yeah.
Right. When there's a terminal illness or a serious illness, there's that anticipation. He was the wage earner. I mean, we even do this. I've seen bereavement risk assessments that include that. Is the person who is dying the primary wage earner in the home? And that speaks to identity, but it also speaks to financial security and future plans and how you'll take care of yourselves. And that sounds kind of basic. It's not so much philosophical and who am I, but grief runs the gamut of all of the different parts of our identity.
It does.
So what do you see as some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about grief?
Starting with grief is only from death.
There you go.
That grief encompasses so much more. Another big one that I really, really hate the phrase of is be strong. I really, really, really hate that phrase. Because strength in that phrase or in that stigma is avoid the grief, don't express it, don't feel it, don't interact with it. And that is actually very detrimental to the grieving process. There are times when that's okay. If you can't even face the grief, fantastic. You may be just trying to survive. And you don't have capacity to even look at the grief. If that's where you're at, fantastic. If you're there for a long, long time and you're avoiding looking at it after you're functioning kind of okay, that's when it gets detrimental to the grieving process.
That makes sense. Are there other misconceptions that you often see? I'm sure as a grief coach, you've seen it, heard it all. So are there other misconceptions that people have about grief that maybe even delay their growth in the grief process or delay the grief journey for them?
Yeah. One of them is that grief is orderly and linear, like going up a ladder. It doesn't often work that way.
No.
Other ones are that ladder is the same for everybody. Even if it's not a ladder, grief is the same for everybody. And you're supposed to do grief a certain way.
Right.
That's not true either.
Right. Who gets to say whether my grief is okay or not, whether it's normal or not?
Isn't a lot of that dictated by society?
Yeah.
Yeah. What we decide, it's like Hallmark cards. There are Hallmark cards that are acceptable and yeah, she's nodding her head that, you go in and if you're looking, somebody's lost a child, somebody's lost a parent, you've lost a job, you're going through a divorce, things like that. There are Hallmark cards for those things. But grief doesn't work that way. There's not a Hallmark card for everything. So I did a talk one time where I was talking about a grief experience that I had after a friend of mine died. And I talked about playing that game Chutes and Ladders with my kids when they were little, which, by the way, I hated because it lasts forever. And I said, grief is a lot like this game because it's convoluted. The game board, you just follow it around. There's nothing linear about it. You get sent back. And I think grief is a lot like that. It's up and down and it's scribbled back and forth and you never really know, are you doing it right? And then you look at the person next to you who's maybe your sibling, who's also lost the same parent, that same relationship, except it's not the same relationship. And they're doing grief in a different way. So are you losing at the game?
Yeah.
Maybe they're further ahead if they look strong, as you're saying. Then somehow I'm getting it wrong. And it doesn't work that way. It's not a comparison. It's not a competition, or are you not grieving enough?
Right.
Maybe you're not a tearful person. Maybe you're not openly tearful in front of other people. You do your grieving more privately. Doesn't mean you're getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Are there a myriad of emotions that you see from people who are grieving? I mean, everything from this typical sadness to anger.
Guilt.
We often think of those emotions as being on, two different ends of the spectrum. And yet anger sometimes can be a part of grief, can't it?
Absolutely. As well as joy and gratitude.
Oh, no, that's interesting.
But do you think anger can be part of a healthy grieving process, a normal grieving process?
Absolutely.
Yeah, not anger like the person has died, but angry afterwards, cleaning out their house. Mom saved all this crap and now we're having to clean it all out. It's just worthless. Is that a healthy thing for someone to experience that as part of a grieving process?
Absolutely. If that's what you're feeling, it's healthy.
Say that again. I really like that.
If that's what you're feeling, it's healthy.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's very good. I can see why you're a good grief coach.
Yeah.
You have these really pithy sayings. Those are good.
It makes sense. So you can't do it wrong. You can do it in an unhealthy way, right?
Right.
There are things that you can use to manage your grief or to cope with your grief that are unhealthy, but you're not doing it wrong.
Correct.
Yeah. So I'm curious, as a grief coach, when people start their process with you, what's one of the first things that you do? Is there an assessment that you do with them? Kind of walk us through the process of how you begin coaching a person through their grief.
So I reach out to people and invite them to a free introductory session. And in that session, I learn where they're at with their grief, what their relationship with grief is, a little bit about their story, what's bringing them to me, how they found me, and what their goals are going forward. When I understand those things about someone, then I can have a better sense of, okay, this is what they're interested in. They may just want to feel better. They may just want to get moving again. They may just want to start living again. Or they may want to completely change their life and build a healthy relationship with grief. Every client is different. So that's why I do that introductory session, so I can figure out a little bit of context of where they're coming from, what their personality is like, what they're looking for, and where they want to go. And then I give them the options. This is how you can work with me, either one session at a time, or 4 or 8 session packages, or a 6-month session package, depending on the work, the amount, the resources that you have to put into it. And if none of those work, I'll give you resources like my podcast or articles that I've written. You can subscribe to my newsletter, check out my website. Fantastic. But I leave it up to the client because, like with grief, it's different for everyone. And every client is different. And they know what they need best.
Do you ever find that people's goals evolve and change? When they start out with you, they say, this is what I think I need right now. This is what I want to do. These are the goals that I want to have. But by the time they've spent time with you and had several sessions, they realize they're going in a different direction and maybe that's not what they needed at all.
I have. One of my clients started with the intent of, how can I help my children grieve? Her husband and their dad died by suicide. And so her goal, it was like decades after the death. Her goal was, how can I help my children grieve? By the time we finished, she was learning who she was and asserting herself and finding her own identity.
So there's some self-discovery along the way.
Absolutely.
As part of the process. Nice.
Very interesting. I like the way that you do that. You empower them to make the decision for what they need and how much help that they need from you along the way. So that's good. That's very good. I like that. Do the majority of your clients then decide, I'm going to need 8 sessions with you, or does it just vary from person to person?
It just varies from person to person. I have some clients. I had one client that thought in the very beginning, I think I'm going to need about 6 months. On that 6-month session, and we met once a month for 6 months. On that 6-month session, she said, I'm good. I thought I needed 6 months and I needed 6 months. I'm good now. I have others that I meet with weekly, and we go 4 sessions at a time. I've done 4 sessions. Okay, I still need more help. I think I need another 4 sessions. I have some that meet as needed, session by session. It very much depends on the client.
The sponsor for this episode is BeyondWordsCo.com. There are times when sending a card or ordering a plant for someone who's experienced a loss just doesn't seem like enough or doesn't seem appropriate. When you want to do more, Beyond Words can help. Their mission is to ensure no one feels alone through life's hardest times. Beyond Words provides care packages that offer comfort when life gets hard. The products in their care packages are hand-picked so that your gift provides the recipient with moments of rest, calm, and peace. You can select a pre-designed gift package or create a custom care package. A customized care package allows you to select products that are personal to the person you're sending it to. Most of the products from Beyond Words are handcrafted in the U.S., responsibly sourced, and organic. To order a care package for your loved one, visit the Beyond Words website at beyondwordsco.com. That's beyondwordsco.com.
As a society, actually as a global society, we've had so many grief challenges, grief changes, and opportunities to grieve over the last couple of years. The pandemic, political unrest, natural disasters, domestic terrorism, you name it, right? It's sort of just become a culture of grief. What changes have you seen? What changes have you seen in the ways people are grieving over the last few years?
I think because it is on a collective scale, and so globally, that we have more conversations about grief. So we're more open to it in a way. We're more open to acknowledging that we can see grief differently, that it doesn't come from just death. I kind of started in pandemic or at the very beginning of the pandemic, so I'm not sure what it was like before then. But just in the time that I have been working as a grief coach, people are more open to looking at grief from a multitude of sources.
Not just related to a loss, but related to all these different things that we were naming.
Yeah, exactly.
So it just seems like maybe there's a heightened awareness all the way across. People like us, we work in hospice, you work in grief care. This is the language we speak every day.
Yeah.
Professionally, right? Yeah. We know this. But there does seem to be such an elevated conversation on a national level, at least here in the United States. And we know that other countries are experiencing the same issues that we are.
Mm-hmm. And I see more conversations happening, not just about grief, but about all of the hard topics: mental health, death, grief,
suicide,
end of life, suicide, absolutely suicide.
Well, COVID and everything that happened because of COVID really did exacerbate what was already happening. So with COVID, the lockdown came. People weren't able to go to their jobs, or their jobs got harder and more difficult. For instance, nurses, first responders, their jobs got much more difficult because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And then there was just this kind of collective sadness because everything in our lives came to a halt. We weren't able to do the things that we normally would do. And so people were experiencing grief, even though they weren't really due to a death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's loss.
It's just loss. Yeah, just this loss of routine, even for that matter, because the routines that we built into our lives, going to work every day, having these things that we always do on the weekends, and all of that got stopped. And I think people who weren't normally feeling any grief were beginning to feel grief, and they didn't know what to do with it. And they were like, what is this I'm feeling? Why am I feeling sad all the time? And I think there was a collective sadness is what we've called it.
Yeah.
And it's been a problem for a lot of people because of that. Have you had some clients who came to you just because they just felt this kind of sadness, but they weren't really sure where it was coming from?
I don't think so. I think all of my clients have come to me with the start of death.
Mm-hmm.
The client that I did talk with this morning, though, I think that one too started with death
Okay.
a few years ago, but her session this morning started, like I said, started with a bag of Girl Scout patches. And so she knew there was something going on, but it wasn't until further into the session that she realized, oh, okay, this is grief.
Right. Not really sure, where it was coming from, but all of a sudden with your help kind of opening up the box and realizing, oh, this is what it is. This is where it's coming from. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can see that.
I think we all could probably use a grief coach like you right about now.
Even me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
true.
need my own grief coach too.
absolutely. Absolutely.
That's right. Even counselors need their own counselors occasionally.
That's true.
Yes.
Who takes care of the people who do the caregiving is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So grief looks different for everybody, right? Everybody grieves differently. I've been saying that to families the entire time I've been working in hospice.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly it was because I was concerned about having, 10 people in a room when a patient died and having this very publicly emotive person and then somebody who's very shut down, and then reminding them this is how you take care of each other, is acknowledging that everybody grieves differently.
Mm-hmm.
Your way is okay. Her way is okay. His way is okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the commonalities? Because we're all human. What are some of the commonalities you see in the grief that people are experiencing in your work as a grief coach?
I like to think of processing grief or metabolizing grief as in phases. And again, they're not linear. They're not necessarily orderly. And there's like a progression, like a common progression. So there may be anticipatory grief, there may not be. That might be the first phase of grief, where that death is coming, that the loss is coming, you see that big grief wave coming, and you brace yourself. And then the loss happens, or the wave hits. Then there's a phase of, I'm just trying to survive. What does this look like financially? What does this look like logistically? What does my life look like? How can I even just breathe and make sure that I'm taken care of, my family's taken care of, if I have kids or spouse or other dependents to support? How do we just go from day to day, making sure that we keep living? And then you can get to the point where, okay, I've done this long enough. I've got those routines ready. I'm able to do something a little bit more. It's kind of like when you're sick and you're in bed. That survival phase is being in bed. You don't have the energy or resources to do anything else. You just need to stay in bed. But then once you start getting healthier, you start getting the urgency or the itch to get out of bed. I'm tired of staying in this stupid bed. I want to get out. So that starts like the movement phase. And we start to think about, what does it look like? What can I do? We want to start moving again. And that leads us into the exploration phase. What's out there as resources? How do I experience grief? What can my new life look like going forward? And then for people who are ready to go on or able to go on, some people don't, and that's okay. Some people really want to, and that's great. After exploring your grief, it can look like metabolizing. what meaning can I make from this grief? What am I learning in the process? How can I use my grief experiences to support others in their grief?
The meaning making is one thing that really helps people to finally come to that place in their journey where it's like they say, aha, this is what I was trying to find. This is what I was trying to finally reach, is to make meaning out of this whole thing that I've been through, this loss, this grief that I've been through. And if I can make meaning out of it, then it's going to make sense to me.
And, I think meaning making is hard. That's probably one of the hardest things we do with a loss. I remember several years ago, we had a coworker, whose son died very suddenly. And going to the funeral and watching another coworker who had lost her daughter and son-in-law in a horrible murder. They were shot. And I watched this woman go up carrying her grief, right, for her own children, and kneel down in front of the mother of this young man that had just died. And I remember I could only see her face, right, because we were all sitting in pews, and watching her talk to the other mother, creating this shared experience. And I thought, man, after all these years, this is meaning. This is meaning to be able to say to someone else, I have been where you are, and I'll be here with you while you do this. Mm-hmm. I share this with you. And I was just blown away. For one thing, how someone else could come up and identify and hold on to their own grief, which is a terrible thing, to lose a child like that. And then to be able to stand in front of someone else and say, here I am with my grief, and I'm going to do this with you. I know you're going through something hard because I do it every day too.
Yeah.
So we'll do it together. I was just really, I'll never forget that. That's one of those vivid memories in my mind, watching the two of them do that. But that is creating meaning.
And it's not for everybody.
Right.
What do you have to go through? No. Some people, I can imagine both of the women found that incredibly painful. But to be able to have the courage to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And that to me would be a way of making meaning.
Okay. So we've kind of led into this a little bit, talking about making meaning and so forth. One of the things that we have heard you say is that there is benefit in grief. I mean, I know that sounds really strange, and some people are going to go, I don't understand what you mean. That doesn't make sense. It's kind of like saying, mean. I love grief. People don't understand it. So let's talk a little bit about this. How can there be benefit in grief? How does that happen?
Well, like you were just sharing, Helen, that experience with those two moms, there's immense connection there. They know each other, they're vulnerable with each other, they're courageous to share that. And it's a very powerful instance of, I see you, I know you, I see what you're going through, I feel you, I witness you in your grief, and I'm there for you.
Right. And they couldn't do that if they hadn't experienced their own grief.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
you have to go through something terrible for that to happen, for that to be able to happen.
Exactly. I'll give you an illustration. I started in hospice 12 years ago. And at that time, I had really never experienced the death of a close family member. And then about 3 years later, my mom died. And from that experience, I had a better understanding of what the families were going through of the patients that I was serving. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have it before. I just didn't have that really personal understanding because I hadn't had the personal experience. And so I think in many ways that personal experience is a benefit, and it helps us to have more compassion, more empathy as we help people through their own grief journey.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jenny, tell us more about you. How do you help process all this? You obviously hear a lot of people talking about their grief. How do you take care of yourself in this? Because we know from our experience working in hospice, self-care is really important. So how do you take care of yourself after you have, listened and coached people through their grief?
So I do have my support people. I have my coaches. I have my therapist. I have my husband. I have my journal. I go to help when I need help.
Good.
I also have been working with grief a lot. So I know when I'm feeling grief, I can recognize it pretty easily. Oh yeah, that's grief. I know what to do because I've worked with my own grief. I know my process. So I do what I need to do. I express it, whether that's in talking or written. I feel it. I lean into it. I get curious with it. And then I learn from it. And I'm good to go. Also, I love grief. So grief energizes me. When I'm in a group session, I get almost hyper. I know I'm a weirdo, and that's okay.
No, I mean, the joy on your face and in your voice, I think our listeners can hear that. You obviously have such a passion for learning about grief and leaning into it. So something you said struck me. You were talking about anticipatory grief when you know that wave is coming at you and you can see it. They always talk about grief coming in waves, right? And you brace yourself for it. So once the wave hits, right, it smacks you in the face, you get water up your nose and it knocks you off your feet, then you have to learn to ride the wave a little bit because you can't get out of it.
Absolutely.
Right? You know you're going to be engulfed by it for a while. And secondary grief is the same way. Unless you work in a field like end of life and funeral and grief counseling and bereavement, you don't realize what it's like to be immersed in all of that all the time. First responders deal with this. I mean, so many professions, care professions around the world do this. You don't realize how much of this you're picking up from each situation. This doesn't have to be my mother, but somehow I identify with that loss. This doesn't have to be my child, but somehow I identify with that loss. And it's not that this could be my mother or this could be my child necessarily, but that this is another human being who's grieving.
Mm-hmm.
So most humans, especially those who are empathic, pick up a little bit of that as they go. And if we are not intelligent, and I use the word intelligent, insightful, self-aware about the effects of the wear and tear of this kind of work and this kind of contact with grief, you can't survive it, not in a healthy way. You'll never make it out on the other side alive. You've got to be able to take care of yourself. So I think as you said, bracing yourself, part of that is to be self-aware and to do some self-searching, look at your responses and your mindset, go to your journal with it, go to your therapist with it. I think that's really smart. I think it's also really smart that you said you've got your counselors, you've got your therapist, and then you have your husband. So he's not the receptacle of all of that. I think that can make it really difficult for your home life relationships too.
So Jenny, tell our listeners what are some of the tools and resources that you can offer for them. Are there any tools and resources that you have? I know you have a podcast. Tell us about your podcast.
I do. So my podcast is called Share Your Story, Exploring Humanity One Heart at a Time. And it started off as just conversations kind of like this, where we're sharing stories and I'm getting to know people. I'm learning about their experiences, what they've learned from it, what it was like for them, and what they, how they incorporated that. Then it morphed into more grief-centered, whether that's grief from a death, grief from their own choices, grief from change in identity, from whatever source it is. I give a little bit of context of what their story is, and then what that experience was really like for them and what they learned from that experience.
People can tune into your podcast then, find it. I assume it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the usual platforms. Okay, very good. So do you have any resources on your website? I assume you have a website.
I do have a website. It's grievingcoach.com.
Grievingcoach.com?
Yep, grievingcoach.com. And it has links to my podcast. It has a link to my YouTube channel. It has my social media profiles. It has upcoming events that I host. I collaborate often with the nonprofit organization Reimagine, both in attending and hosting events there. So that page is linked through my website as well.
Awesome. Well, that's great. We really want to point our listeners to your webpage where they can find your resources and connect with you. Jenny, you're awesome. Thank you so much for what you're doing in this grief space, because we know that there are times when we need folks like you. We need people who have this tenderness and compassionate heart. And it's obvious from just being with you today that that's you. That describes you perfectly, I think. And so we want to point our listeners in your direction and invite them to go to your website and take advantage of what you have there.
An easy way to get all of what I'm doing in one place is to sign up for my email newsletter. Because I write grief tips, I write my events, I write about my podcast, I write about articles that I'm writing. Everything is in my newsletter.
Awesome. I'll put a link in the show notes to your website. And also, if I can put a link in there for the subscription too, I'll do that as well so that they can get a hold of you. Jenny Dilts, you are a nice breath of fresh air. You have such a joy about you, even when we're talking about grief. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun. Yes, I did say that. Grief is fun, or can be.
That's good.
I think we could have talked a whole lot more about the different phases that she was talking about, the waves. She's got so much knowledge on this. Grief is such a human experience. And have we not just been wading in it up to our eyeballs over the last couple of years?
Yeah, definitely. With the pandemic and everything that went along with the pandemic, the lockdown, and unable to travel, unable to go places, unable to do anything, having to wear masks and all that went along with the pandemic. And it created, I think, a grief in people that they couldn't even name. They just weren't sure why they felt the way that they felt.
She really has a good way, such an accurate way, I think, of looking at that. You know, it's a loss of identity. It's a loss of these different connections. You know, when you think about during the lockdown, you know, where we were restricted from social gatherings because of the transmission of the virus, that's a huge ritual. So take funerals and weddings, just those two things, or just take funerals, right? Because that was a huge thing. We had so many people that were dying from COVID. And you take away that gathering, that connection with other people, connection to the rituals that we know, the acknowledgement of the loss, the validation of the grief. Man.
Right.
Just that one thing.
Well, you know, Jenny's definition of grief, part of that was loss of connection.
Yes.
And it makes sense.
It absolutely does. I think there's a lot of depth in that. You could peel the onion back. There's so many layers to that. She is awesome.
She really is. And I love the way that she allows her clients to basically select the kind of care that they need, because it's up to them. They know themselves, and she's just here as the grief coach to walk them through and help them to understand. And so she allows them to basically set the goals, create the care plan, if you will. That's kind of something that in hospice, we understand those terms.
Right.
So they get to create the care plan. And then from that, she helps them work out some of the grief concerns that they have.
It's interesting when she said, people typically will start out with certain goals. This is what I'd like to do, like her client saying, I want to help my kids deal with the death of their dad. And then when you get to the middle of your sessions with Jenny, you realize I have other goals.
Right.
Maybe this is where I started, but that's probably not where I am now, and it's not where I'm going to end up. A lot of personal exploration there, I think.
So our thanks to Jenny for being on the podcast and sharing her wisdom and insights with us. We're so grateful to her for doing that. And be sure to check out her website at grievingcoach.com. And she's got some resources there. She's got links to her podcast and links to other resources and tools that she offers. So best place to go to her website, grievingcoach.com.
And when you're checking out our podcast on all the platforms, you can check out her podcast, Share Your Story, Exploring Humanity One Heart at a Time.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Hospice. I'm Jerry Finter here with Helen Bauer. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts.
To connect with us, just send an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You can also find us on social media. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.